All right, let's settle in. Imagine you're lying under a cozy blanket, maybe sipping some tea, and I'm about to tell you a story. Not a fairy tale with sparkling knights and immaculate castles, but a quiet, slightly cheeky trip back to a time of plagues, punishments, and porridge. Hollywood has given us the glossy highlights, shining armor, noble quests, everyone suspiciously clean. The truth is a little muddier, itchier, and colder. Picture it. The year is 1325. Good news first, you're alive. Bad news, so are the fleas. Your bed is a sagging straw mattress that, not long ago, was part of a barn floor. There's no memory foam, no supportive pillows, no crisp sheets. Instead, you have a heavy wool blanket that hasn't been washed since last winter and now weighs about as much as a small cow. Somewhere in the distance, a church bell starts clanging. It's the medieval version of an alarm clock, loud, relentless, and utterly devoid of a snooze button. You're lying inside a small wooden hut with a single room, no windows, and what could charitably be called open-concept living. Your family, a few animals, and a thriving community of insects all share the same space. The air is a fragrant blend of stale beer, human sweat, goat, and something that's probably mold. There are no scented candles, and even if there were, they'd just collapse into the dirt floor. You stretch, and your joints creak like a door in need of oil. At 22, you're already considered middle-aged here. Your knees sound like a bag of rocks being shaken by someone who's not entirely sure why. When you finally sit up, your feet land on a floor that's either damp from the rain leaking through the roof or crusty from whatever the neighbor's chicken did during the night. Either way, your toes are now part of the ecosystem. Privacy isn't a thing. Your parents, siblings, maybe a cousin who forgot to leave years ago, and a few rodents are all waking up beside you. No bedrooms, no curtains, no personal space. Just one big communal everything. Welcome to morning in medieval Europe, where solitude is a luxury no one can afford, and fleas are your most loyal companions. Then comes nature's call. Not a gentle reminder, but an urgent demand. Modern bathrooms haven't been invented. There's no toilet, no flush, no paper, not even a sulking plunger in the corner. Here, relieving yourself is a task that's part necessity, part public performance. If you're a peasant, your bathroom is a wooden bucket behind the house, which is probably already full because Uncle Wolfstan had an unfortunate run-in with some bad turnips. The smell is biblical. You hold your breath, do what must be done, and then toss it into the street. Yes, the street. Technically, you're supposed to yell "Gardez-vous," Old French for "watch out for the water," beforehand, but no one really moves fast enough. Streets are essentially open sewers, carrying away a steady flow of human waste, animal droppings, and mysterious liquids you'd rather not think about. If you happen to live in a town with public latrines, lucky you. That means sitting shoulder to shoulder with strangers in an outhouse where privacy is a myth and ventilation is more of a suggestion than a feature. Toilet paper doesn't exist. People wipe with straw, leaves, moss, scraps of rags, or, for those feeling extravagant, a bit of wool. Some skip the wiping altogether. It's a far cry from heated floors and air-freshened bathrooms, and this is only the beginning of the day. Which might explain why handshakes hadn't exactly caught on yet. And if you happen to be in a castle, surely things are better up there in the towers, right? Well, sort of. You might have what's called a garderobe, a charming little hole in the wall that drops your waist straight down into the moat. It sounds clever until you remember that your enemies know this too. Yes, attackers sometimes climbed in through the waist chute. Talk about making an entrance through the back door. Whether you're a farmer or a baron, using the toilet in the Middle Ages is less a private necessity and more a cold, public, mildly humiliating ritual. It's dangerous, disgusting, and one bad step on a whetstone could land you face first in humanity's collective leftovers. And you still haven't brushed your teeth, but that's coming soon. You've survived the medieval toilet. Surely breakfast will be your reward. Something warm, hearty, comforting. Except this is medieval Europe. Nothing is comforting here. Breakfast is a grim event. No eggs Benedict, no coffee machine sputtering awake, no avocado toast on sourdough. Instead, you settle near the fire with a wooden bowl of something that looks like it was scraped off the bottom of a muddy boot. This is pottage, a thick, gloopy stew made from whatever is lying around. Grains, root vegetables, maybe some beans if fortune smiles on you. It's been simmering in the same pot for days, sometimes weeks, with fresh ingredients simply added on top as time goes on. Think less recipe and more culinary experiment that never ends. Next to it, a hunk of bread so hard it could deflect arrows. It's made from coarse rye or barley flour, sometimes bulked up with sawdust, crushed acorns, or whatever filler someone could find. Wheat is the stuff of dreams reserved for the wealthy. You don't slice this bread, you negotiate with it. As for drinks, forget juice or lattes, you're drinking beer. Yes, beer at 6 in the morning, not because you're throwing a medieval brunch, but because the water is full of parasites. Weak ale is safer than water, so everyone drinks it, even children. No one loves it, but at least it won't kill you immediately. Meat or cheese? Only on special religious feast days, and only if your lord is feeling generous. Fresh fruit is rare, and spices like pepper cost more than you earn in a month. Salt is precious enough to be locked away, so you chew your gritty bread, gulp down your beer, and try not to think about the rat that may have visited your pottage during the night. Breakfast doesn't set you up for the day, it just happens to you. Then it's time to get dressed, though getting dressed is more about layering on suffering than choosing an outfit. You have one set of clothes. One. A rough wool tunic or linen shift that you've been wearing daily for months, maybe years. Fashion seasons aren't a thing. You wear it until it falls apart or gives you a fungal infection. Underwear is optional. If you're lucky, you have a linen under tunic. If not, you're going commando under scratchy, sweaty wool, sewn together by someone who probably didn't quite understand seams. There's no soap, no washing machine, and definitely no dry cleaner. Your clothes are stiff, stained, and smell like a compost pile left too close to a pigsty. Washing them is a task worthy of its own epic poem. Hauling water from the river, heating it over a fire, scrubbing the fabric with ashes or lye, and hanging it to dry in the rare sunlight. Shoes, if you even have them, are made of untreated leather that offers about as much arch support as a banana peel. Most people go barefoot, trudging through mud, dung, sharp rocks, and puddles of questionable substances. Your skin is in open revolt. Fleas, lice, and bedbugs live on you rent-free, no matter who you are, noble, monk, or child. Everyone scratches constantly, sometimes absent-mindedly with a wooden spoon while chatting with the local priest. Your scalp is a battlefield, your skin is raw, and if you develop a rash, there's no ointment, no doctor, no helpful cream. You simply accept your new medieval companion and carry on. If you're lucky, it won't get infected. If you're not, well, good luck. Finally, wrapped in itchy, damp wool and layered in discomfort, you're ready to greet the world. But before you flash that morning smile, remember, this is the Middle Ages. Smiling isn't dangerous emotionally, it's dangerous dentally. There's no toothbrush, no toothpaste, no floss, no minty mouthwash. Oral hygiene is about as fashionable as regular bathing, which is to say, not very. Some people chew on twigs, others rinse with wine or vinegar, but for the most part, your teeth are left to fend for themselves. And they're not winning. By your mid-20s, your smile resembles something that's escaped from a haunted crypt. Cavities are everywhere, gums are swollen, and those brown spots aren't food stains. They're decay. There's more rot in your mouth than in a medieval root cellar. Sugar is starting to creep in, imported at great cost for the wealthy. Nobles get to ruin their teeth faster with fancy cakes, while peasants take the slow route, years of gritty porridge, hard bread, and relentless chewing. Toothaches are constant, a background hum of misery like medieval weather. There's no dentist. If a tooth hurts badly enough, you might pray, drink, or simply pull it out yourself with pliers. Barber surgeons, the multitaskers of the era, are ready to help too. The same man who trims your hair will yank out your molar by candlelight using an iron hook and no anesthesia. One infected tooth can spiral into fever, sepsis, and death. A trip to the pharmacy today, a funeral in the 1300s. Socially, things aren't any brighter. Halitosis is universal. Kissing isn't about fresh breath. It's about land and livestock. Your mouth is a battlefield, and it's losing. Now it's time to step outside, because your real job, the one that breaks your back, is waiting. There's no office, no desk, no coffee break, and definitely no promotions. If you're like most people, you're a peasant. You work someone else's land from sunrise to sunset, 6 days a week. Sunday is technically off, unless you're harvesting, fighting raiders, or praying for your infected toe to stop turning black. Your tools are a wooden hoe, a rusty sickle, and whatever bones haven't cracked yet. The work is relentless. Fields are plowed by hand or with oxen, if you're wealthy enough to have one. You dig, plant, weed, carry, and sweat until your spine starts to resemble a crooked letter. No one's asking about your stress levels. If you're a woman, you work the fields and then go home to cook, clean, spin wool, feed animals, raise children, and pretend your husband's lice problem isn't slowly moving into your hair. Children join the workforce around age 5, trading toys and schooling for chores and a small wooden rake. If you're not a farmer, maybe you're a blacksmith, a tanner, or a cooper. Great. You get to spend your days with fire, chemicals, or animal guts in a dark shed with no ventilation. The pay is survival. The benefits include splinters, burns, broken bones, and the occasional infection. You keep working through it all, because if you don't work, you don't eat. And if you don't eat, someone else takes your place, so you grip your shovel, ignore the blisters, and keep going. This isn't a career. It's a slow, grinding endurance test. And while you're out there working yourself into the ground, the weather is doing its best to make life worse. Seasons are less picturesque and more divine punishment. Winter means no insulation, no heating, and wooden walls with gaps big enough to lob a chicken through. Windows are covered with cloth, not glass. The hearth fire sounds cozy, but you can't keep it burning all night. Wood is expensive, and collecting it from the wrong forest can literally get you executed. You wrap yourself in your one damp wool tunic, huddle by the fading embers, and wake up with your nose frozen solid. Your feet are permanently cold and often damp, like they've been soaking in a puddle for months. Your fingers stiffen into tiny medieval popsicles, and when frostbite sets in, no one gives it a name. It's just considered bad luck. Then comes summer, which sounds like a relief until it isn't. Your home turns into a clay oven. There's no fan, no breeze, and definitely no deodorant. You sweat through your layers, but taking them off isn't an option. Showing too much skin is scandalous, and besides, you'd be trading social judgment for sunburn and a buffet of insect bites. Flies swarm around you, drawn to your unwashed body, and the scent of last week's goat stew fermenting peacefully in the corner. Mosquitoes whine in your ears while you try to sleep, competing with the nighttime symphony of crying babies and shouting neighbors. Out in the fields, the sun cooks you alive. There's no sunblock, and if you're lucky, you've fashioned a hat out of straw like a desperate scarecrow. The work doesn't stop just because you're melting. Heat stroke is simply referred to as taking a bad turn. So you alternate between shivering through winters in your damp tunic, wondering if your toes will survive, and sweating through summers while your thighs chafe into oblivion. And through it all, your clothes still itch, your food is still terrible, and there's always more work waiting. Medieval climate control is simple. There is none. Feeling thirsty? Want to splash some cool water on your face to snap out of this feverish reality? Too bad. Water in the Middle Ages isn't your friend. It's plotting against you. That picturesque stream nearby might look fresh and clear, like something out of a fantasy movie. But upstream, someone has probably just emptied a chamber pot into it. Or worse, there's a dead pig floating somewhere you can't see. Parasites, bacteria, and an entire microscopic army are waiting in every sip. This is why everyone drinks beer, including children. Not the strong kind. Small beer, weak in alcohol but strong in survival. Brewing involves boiling the water, making it safer than whatever's flowing through the town ditch. If you're wealthy, you might drink wine in the mornings, because why not start your day slightly inebriated when life is already this grim? Bathing is another story. In theory, yes, water can clean you. In practice, most people avoid it. The prevailing medical belief is that washing opens your pores and invites disease. So the layer of grime on your skin is considered a kind of health shield. Communal bathhouses exist, but quickly develop reputations for gossip, scandal, and extracurricular activities that make the local priest frown. Eventually, the church shuts many of them down. Even if you do want to bathe, it's a production. You haul water from the well, boil it over a fire, fill a leaky wooden tub, and hope no one else uses the water before or after you. Collecting rainwater isn't much better. Barrels sit uncovered, gathering bird droppings, insects, and moss. It's less refreshing and more liquid roulette. Water, whether for drinking, washing, or irrigating, is always a gamble. One unlucky gulp, and you could spend your final days sweating in a straw bed, holding your stomach, and regretting everything. Next time you pour yourself a glass of clean tap water, that's worth a silent toast to your medieval ancestors. And if the water doesn't get you, a rock probably will. Stub your toe the wrong way, step on something sharp, or get nicked in the fields. An infection isn't far behind. You need help. You need a doctor. Unfortunately, you live in the Middle Ages, where medicine is a delicate mix of guesswork, theology, and light torture. Every illness, whether it's a cough, a broken bone, or the plague, is blamed on your humors being out of balance. The four humors are blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile. Your health is believed to depend on keeping this internal soup properly mixed. Got a fever? Clearly, you have too much blood. The solution? Bloodletting. Out comes a dull blade or a leech, and out goes a portion of your life force into a bowl. And yes, barbers are often the ones doing it. You sit down for a haircut and leave with less hair, less blood, and a slightly spinning head. 2 for 1, baby. Feeling sad or anxious? That's clearly an excess of black bile. The solution is obvious. Laxatives. Maybe a warm herbal purge if you're fancy. Or just some prayers and a cold compress, while everyone around you quietly starts carving your coffin. Break a bone or get a nasty wound, and you're in for a rough time. There's no anesthesia unless you count passing out from pain. Surgery is performed with knives that haven't been cleaned since someone's great-grandfather went on crusade. The tools are heated over a fire. Not to sterilize them, but because glowing metal looks intimidating. Antibiotics don't exist. Germ theory won't be a thing for centuries. Illness is caused by bad air. Or God being unimpressed with your behavior. Got a stomachache? Clearly, that's your sinful thoughts acting up. Time to confess between bouts of vomiting. If things get worse, expect more leeches, maybe some crushed beetles, and a priest giving you last rites just in case. At this point, the cure they're preparing for is death, and if by some miracle you survive, everyone assumes God took pity on you. The doctor claims credit, and the leech gets promoted. Medicine isn't about healing, it's about surviving the treatment. After a long day of work, lice and leeches, you shuffle back to your hovel, stomach growling, ready for the one joy left in life: dinner. Bad news. Your meal is probably plotting against you. Food preservation is almost non-existent. No fridge, no freezer, just salt, smoke, and winter air if you're lucky. Meat, if you have any, has been hanging for days, buzzing with flies, soaking in questionable brine, and possibly shared with a rat. Bread is the backbone of your diet, but even that's unreliable. In bad years, it's bulked out with bark, sawdust, or clay. And if it's made from rye, there's a chance you're getting a bonus of ergot fungus, a lovely surprise that causes convulsions, hallucinations, and sometimes death. It's like eating bread laced with LSD and tetanus. Vegetables are seasonal, and the one thing always in season is turnips. Boiled turnips, mashed turnips, floating in pottage turnips. Fruit shows up briefly in autumn, then rots, and sugar is rare and hoarded by the rich, who use it to decorate their cakes and ruin their teeth faster. Dairy is a gamble. Milk spoils in hours, and while butter and cheese last longer, they're loaded with bacteria. People eat them anyway because the alternative is gnawing on old leather. Spices like pepper, cinnamon, or nutmeg are worth more than gold. Flavor for a peasant means onions, a pinch of salt if you're lucky, and a lot of resignation. Most meals taste like wet burlap sprinkled with sadness. And food isn't just dangerous for your health, it's dangerous politically. Game animals belong to the Lord. Poach a rabbit, and you could be fined, jailed, or hanged. So you sit by the fire with your gray stew, flickering light, casting long shadows, and you eat. Because in the Middle Ages, food doesn't comfort you, it tests you. Evening falls, but the day isn't yours. God is watching. So is the priest. And so is your neighbor Agnes, who will absolutely report you if you skip Mass. Religion isn't part of life, it is life. The church controls your calendar, your laws, your education, if you can read, your birth, marriage, death, and everything in between. Think of it as your spiritual landlord, and you're always behind on rent. Daily life is structured around church bells ringing morning, noon, and night. Not because anyone forgets to pray, but because missing prayer is a sin. Forget to bow, sin. Eat meat on a Friday, sin. Think about your neighbor's wife in a dream, double sin. Hell is described in vivid detail. Rivers of fire, boiling blood, demons with pitchforks, eternal wailing. If the plague doesn't scare you, eternal damnation will. And reading the Bible for yourself isn't an option. It's in Latin, a language reserved for monks, clergy, and the occasional noble child who's too good for farm work. You rely entirely on the church to tell you what it says. And what it says is, obey, repent, and keep working. That means if the priest declares your crop failed because you didn't pray hard enough, there's only one solution. Get on your knees and try harder. Tithes are mandatory. 10% of everything you own goes straight to the church. Wheat, they'll take it. Eggs, hand them over. Nothing to give? Congratulations, you're both spiritually in debt and financially doomed. Holidays are holy days. There are dozens of them, but they're not for merriment. They're for fasting, confession, prayer, and reminding yourself that joy is suspicious. Questioning the church isn't wise. Heretics are burned, witches are drowned, blasphemers flogged, and skeptics brought back into line quickly. So you go through the motions. You chant, bow, pray, and hope that after this mud-caked existence, your soul ends up in paradise. Assuming the priest likes you, God might be merciful. The church, less so. And if you thought being a medieval peasant was rough, try doing it as a woman. Same filth, famine, and fear, but with childbirth, subservience, and social invisibility thrown in. It's like playing life on hard mode with no potions and no restart. From birth, a girl's path is set. Marry young, bear children, serve your husband, die exhausted. Education is rare unless you're a noble sent to a convent, and even then it's limited. Marriage happens early, betrothed at 12, pregnant by 14, and it's never about love. It's about land, livestock, and alliances. Your opinion is not part of the deal. Once married, you're effectively your husband's property. Your job is to produce heirs, keep the house running, feed everyone, and definitely not complain. Complaining might earn you the title of witch, and that comes with a complimentary drowning or burning depending on local fashion. Childbirth is a gamble with terrifying odds. There's no prenatal care, no sterile equipment, no pain relief. Midwives do what they can, but even minor complications can be fatal for mother, child, or both. Some women survive 10 pregnancies. Many don't survive 2. And once the baby arrives, your workload doubles. You now have a screaming infant in a lice-ridden hut, and you're expected to nurse, cook, clean, and help in the fields. There's no maternity leave. You are the maternity leave for everyone else. If you're unmarried, people are suspicious. If you're widowed, you're vulnerable. If you're outspoken, you're dangerous. Herbal knowledge, confidence, or just an odd look on a rainy Tuesday can earn you a witchcraft accusation. Even in the church, your role is limited. Nuns live under strict rules, speaking only with permission, moving only when allowed, and always existing spiritually a rung below men. As a woman, you endure, obey, reproduce, and suffer in silence, preferably with a smile. And just when you think the day can't get worse, violence arrives. Loud, bloody, and completely normal by medieval standards. This isn't a peaceful era. Law and order mean hoping the local lord doesn't wake up cranky. Violence is everywhere. In homes, streets, churches, battlefields, and even breadlines. Crime is common, punishment is brutal, and justice is more spectacle than protection. Steal bread, lose a hand. Accused of lying, get your tongue pierced. Gossip too much, and you're fitted with a scold's bridle, a metal mask with a bar in your mouth, all in the name of correction. If you're accused of something serious like heresy, witchcraft, or theft, proving innocence involves trial by ordeal. One version has you plunging your hand into boiling water to retrieve a stone. If it heals cleanly in 3 days, you're innocent. If not, you're guilty. Another involves being thrown into a river. Sink and you're innocent, but drowned. Float and you're guilty anyway. It's a medieval game show where the prize is survival and the host is very much rooting against you. If you're sentenced to death, it's a community event. Hangings, beheadings, burnings. People gather to watch, cheer, and sometimes bring snacks. It's the medieval version of live entertainment, only with more screaming and fewer commercials. Domestic violence is entirely normal. Husbands are allowed, expected, even, to discipline their wives and children. Street fights are everyday occurrences. You can be beaten simply for making eye contact with the wrong noble's horse. War is always simmering somewhere. Local feuds, territorial squabbles, crusades. Someone is constantly marching off to stab someone else for honor, for God, or simply out of boredom. Violence isn't a failure of the system in the Middle Ages. It is the system. Life is fragile. Justice is arbitrary. And your neighbor might cave your head in over a pig. So you walk carefully, keep your eyes down, and avoid anyone holding a club. By now, you've endured lice, leeches, unwashed clothes, social humiliation, and the constant threat of public disembowelment. But there's one final, unavoidable chapter in the medieval story. Death. And it usually comes early and without ceremony. If you make it past 40, you're a legend. People might even call you the Old One, which is less affectionate nickname and more statistical anomaly. Life expectancy averages 30 to 40 years, but that number is dragged down by heartbreaking infant mortality. Nearly half of all children die before reaching 5. Disease, malnutrition, or one brutal winter is all it takes. No vaccines, no antibiotics, no real hope. If you survive childhood, adulthood greets you already weary. Work starts when you can walk upright, and by 25, your body creaks like a monastery door in the wind. You might be missing teeth, a finger, or most of your original enthusiasm for life. For women, childbirth is a leading cause of death. No pain relief, no sterile equipment, no doctors, just prayer, hot water, and someone holding your hand while you bleed out on a straw-stuffed cot. For men, death lurks in farming accidents, infected cuts, a neighbor's drunken temper, a crusade gone wrong, or a chance encounter with a bandit. Plague can wipe out entire cities overnight. Famine can hollow out villages over months. Bad luck, a spoiled meal, a nasty fever can finish the job. Funerals are quick. Bodies are buried fast to avoid spreading disease. There's no embalming, no polished coffin, just a hole in the ground, a few mumbled prayers, and a shallow mound of earth, if the churchyard still has space. Life is brutal, short, and surrounded by death in every form, from the casual to the catastrophic. You don't retire, you simply stop showing up. And speaking of final chapters, let's reflect on your day. You woke up in filth, relieved yourself into a bucket, brushed your teeth with wishful thinking, ate food that actively wanted to harm you, worked until your spine begged for mercy, scratched your way through itchy wool, prayed not to get the plague, and narrowly avoided public execution for owning the wrong woodland creature. This is a single, ordinary day in medieval Europe. Still dreaming of being a knight? Think again. That romanticized Middle Ages, the noble swordsman, the elegant ladies in towers, the glorious feasts in candlelit halls, is a polished myth. The reality is gritty, cruel, and deeply unfair. Hierarchy rules everything. If you're born poor, you stay poor. If you're born rich, your odds improve. But you're still one bad soup away from dysentery and a hasty burial. Even nobles live in drafty stone refrigerators filled with fleas and smoke. Their marriages arranged for politics, not love. Fur cloaks and wine goblets don't stop infected splinters. The simpler times weren't simple. Everything was slower, harder, and more dangerous. Every task carried risk. Childbirth, chewing, drinking water. Dreaming of something better didn't change the fact that upward mobility didn't exist, modern medicine hadn't been invented, and there was no internet to quietly Google your symptoms. You lived, worked, suffered, and died within a 10-mile radius of where you were born. And yet, despite everything, people laughed. They sang songs, told stories, fell in love, and carved out moments of joy. Not because life was easy, but because humans are stubborn that way. Even in the darkest chapters, they made space for light. So tonight, when you slip into a clean bed, turn on the heating, and drink safe water without a second thought, maybe send a quiet thank you to the modern world and to your ancestors who wrestled with rats, famine, disease, and feudalism so you wouldn't have to. Born Sophie Friederike Augusta von Anhalt-Zerbst in 1729, she came from a small, rather forgettable German principality in Pomerania. Her family's duchy didn't exactly make waves on the European stage, but Sophie had something titles couldn't give: a razor-sharp mind, disarming charm, and a quiet, relentless hunger for greatness. Her upbringing was strict. Her mother, Johanna, was cold and ambitious, more interested in climbing social ladders than in bedtime stories. Her father, a Prussian officer, was distant, the kind of man who loved his uniform more than conversation. From an early age, Sophie learned to balance obedience with strategy. She read everything she could get her hands on, spoke multiple languages, and became an expert at watching a room before opening her mouth, skills that would soon become survival tools at one of Europe's most dangerous courts. When Empress Elizabeth of Russia began searching for a bride for her heir, Grand Duke Peter, she looked beyond her borders. Peter was of German descent, and Elizabeth believed a foreign bride, grateful, pliable, and easy to manage, would suit her plans. Sophie fit perfectly, noble blood, a Lutheran faith that could be swapped for orthodoxy, and a reputation for grace and humility. At just 14, Sophie was summoned to Russia. She arrived in the freezing capital of St. Petersburg in 1744, wearing thin German fabrics and her most diplomatic smile. Her mother treated her like a chess piece, nudging her forward toward power. Sophie, however, had her own strategy. To ingratiate herself with Russian society, she converted to Orthodoxy, publicly and symbolically, taking the name Ekaterina Alexeyevna Catherine. It wasn't just a religious change, it was a point of no return. She was burning the bridge behind her, stepping into a foreign empire with nothing but ambition to carry her forward. No one looking at that quiet teenage girl in her fur-trimmed coat could have guessed what she'd become, a revolutionary empress who would reshape an empire. Catherine's marriage to Grand Duke Peter was supposed to cement her place in the Romanov dynasty. In reality, it felt more like a cage than a coronation. Peter was no storybook prince. He was awkward, emotionally stunted, and obsessed with toy soldiers. Rather than ruling, he spent his time staging elaborate mock battles in his rooms, ignoring his wife and his duties. Some accounts suggest he refused to consummate the marriage for years. He idolized Frederick the Great of Prussia and resented the Russian court that had adopted him. Catherine, by contrast, embraced Russia with calculated intensity. She learned the language, studied its history, memorized Orthodox rituals, and worked to win the hearts of the people she hoped to rule. He wanted to escape. She wanted to belong. The mismatch wasn't just personal, it was political. The Russian court was a nest of intrigue, paranoia, and razor-edged power plays. Empress Elizabeth still ruled absolutely, but her health was failing. Everyone was preparing for a transfer of power, and everyone had their own plans. Catherine's every move was watched. Her letters were opened, her friendships monitored, her alliances scrutinized. She couldn't trust her husband, her mother, or even her servants. But Catherine was patient. She quietly cultivated allies in the military, charmed intellectuals, and developed a reputation for poise and intelligence, qualities that made her shine against Peter's childish tantrums and cultural tone-deafness. Behind closed doors, she devoured Enlightenment thinkers like Voltaire and Montesquieu. While others saw her as a foreign consort, she was already shaping a vision of a stronger, more educated, more rational Russia. There was just one problem: Peter. As long as he lived, she remained a powerless wife, married to an unfit ruler. So she waited, she observed, she planned. She understood that the Russian throne wasn't going to be inherited. It would have to be taken. In 1762, after nearly 2 decades of maneuvering, Catherine saw her chance. Empress Elizabeth died, and Peter became Tsar Peter III. His reign collapsed almost immediately. Within months, he alienated the church, offended the nobility, insulted the army, and openly praised Prussia, Russia's old enemy. He reversed policies, mocked traditions, threatened divorce, and flaunted his mistress. The court turned cold. The army whispered. Ordinary Russians saw him as a foreign puppet. Catherine, watching it all unfold, made her move. In July of that year, while Peter was at his summer palace, she launched a bloodless coup. Supported by key military officers, including her lover Grigory Orlov and his well-connected brothers, Catherine rode through the streets of St. Petersburg in full imperial regalia. She was proclaimed Empress Catherine II, and the elite imperial guard quickly pledged their loyalty to her. Peter, caught completely off guard and lacking allies, surrendered within days. He was arrested and shortly afterward turned up dead under mysterious circumstances. The official report blamed a hemorrhoidal colic. The unofficial story was far less delicate: murder. Catherine had become empress not through birthright or marriage, but through sheer will, intellect, and audacity. A foreign-born woman with no legitimate claim to the throne had taken Russia without a single battle. But taking power was one thing. Keeping it was another. Russia had to accept her. The nobility had to respect her. The empire had to hold together under her hand. She knew that a throne won through intrigue could slip away just as quickly. So she began to transform herself, from a calculating conspirator into a ruler with vision. Catherine didn't settle for sitting on a throne. She wanted to reshape Russia intellectually, politically, and culturally. Where Peter idolized Frederick the Great and toy soldiers, Catherine admired Voltaire, Diderot, and the thinkers of the Enlightenment. She believed in reason, education, and the idea that a monarch should serve the people, though she had no intention of surrendering her absolute authority. She didn't just read Enlightenment philosophy. She practiced it strategically. She corresponded with Voltaire for more than 15 years, charming him while defending her power. She invited Diderot to her court and purchased his entire library to support him financially. Behind the glitter of her salons, she buried herself in legal texts and policy drafts. She created the Legislative Commission of 1767, a bold effort to rewrite the entire Russian legal code. Her nakaz, or instruction, was essentially a political manifesto, advocating equality before the law, condemning torture, and laying out a ruler's duty to serve the common good. For 18th century Russia, it was radical, but ideals met reality in a vast, feudal, deeply conservative empire. Catherine moved with care. She abolished some forms of torture, expanded secular education, built schools and libraries, and promoted learning. But she also cemented the nobility's power over their serfs to keep their loyalty intact. She balanced Parisian philosophy with Muscovite pragmatism, playing both philosopher-queen and hard-nosed ruler. Her goal wasn't to make Russia European. It was to make Russia modern, on her terms. She didn't stop at internal reform. Catherine wanted to project Russian power outward. Where Peter the Great had opened a window to the west, Catherine intended to tear down the walls. Under her leadership, Russia expanded its borders more than ever before. She waged wars not only to defend her reign, but to reshape Europe's geopolitical map. One of her most significant campaigns targeted the Ottoman Empire in the 1760s and 1770s. For Catherine, it wasn't just about territory, it was about influence. She cast herself as the protector of Orthodox Christians under Muslim rule and the defender of Eastern Europe. Under generals like Alexander Suvorov and Grigory Potemkin, Russian forces captured Crimea, seized control of the northern Black Sea coast, and finally gained access to warm water ports, something the Tsars had coveted for generations. Each victory was both practical and symbolic. Russia was no longer the distant, half-forgotten cousin of Europe. It had become a continental power. Her gaze turned westward, too. Through shrewd diplomacy and a series of partitions, Catherine joined Austria and Prussia in carving up the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth. By the end of the Third Partition in 1795, Poland had disappeared from the map, and Russia claimed enormous new territories and millions of new subjects. But Catherine's conquests weren't all military. She didn't just expand with armies, she colonized with ideas. New cities rose on the steppe, trade routes stretched like veins across the empire, and German settlers were invited to cultivate Russian farmland. From the icy Baltic to the sun-drenched shores of the Black Sea, Russia became a patchwork of peoples, languages, and ambitions, all under her watchful eye. Catherine remained at the center of it all, reading reports, issuing decrees, and shaping the empire like a strategist moving pieces on a vast board. Critics called her power-hungry, even imperialistic. Catherine called it destiny. In her view, a great ruler wasn't measured only by ideas, but by borders. She didn't just want to govern Russia, she wanted to remake it, civilized, formidable, admired abroad, and loyal to her alone. Of course, history doesn't just remember her for policies and conquests. It also remembers the whispers behind palace walls. Catherine's private life was one of the most talked about elements of her reign. She had lovers, not a secret handful, but a carefully curated procession of them, often younger, handsome, and politically useful. She didn't hide these relationships. She managed them like everything else. Good behavior earned her favorites, titles, estates, and pensions. Bad behavior earned them a graceful exit, often with a promotion as a parting gift. Among the most important of these men was Grigory Potemkin, brilliant, ambitious, and utterly devoted to her. Their bond blurred the lines between romance, politics, and co-rule. Some historians even suspect they secretly married. Together they directed military campaigns, colonization efforts, and the transformation of southern Russia. Potemkin wasn't merely a lover. He was a partner in empire building. Europe, of course, couldn't look past the scandal. Gossip circulated like wildfire. Satirical pamphlets painted her as lustful and unhinged. And after her death, enemies concocted the most grotesque and completely false rumors, including the infamous horse tale, designed to smear her legacy. The obsession was telling. Catherine was a woman who wielded power unapologetically, and that made people nervous. In an age where female rulers were supposed to be saintly or tragic, she was neither. She ruled, loved, and lived on her own terms. Ironically, while her detractors painted her as immoral, Catherine's view of love and pleasure was philosophical. She believed personal happiness didn't need to conflict with public duty. She kept her emotions separate from governance, a trick many male rulers never mastered. Her liaisons were often strategic. She surrounded herself with capable, loyal men and let them go when they ceased to be useful, usually with generosity rather than scandal. Her love life didn't weaken her rule, it reinforced it, blending passion and power into something unforgettable. But her reign wasn't without peril. In 1773, danger came from within. A bearded Cossack named Yemelyan Pugachev emerged, claiming to be none other than Peter III, Catherine's dead husband. He insisted he had survived the coup and returned to reclaim the throne. It was absurd, but to Russia's oppressed lower classes, it didn't need to be true. It needed to sound true. He promised liberation, the end of serfdom, lower taxes, and land for the common people. His words ignited rebellion along the Volga, among peasants, Cossacks, and old believers, who saw in him a savior. The Pugachev rebellion grew into the largest peasant uprising in Russian history. Towns fell, fortresses were seized, nobles were slaughtered. For a brief, terrifying moment, it looked like the empire itself might crack. Catherine was shaken, but not paralyzed. She dispatched professional troops to crush the revolt with ruthless efficiency. In 1774, Pugachev's forces were defeated. He was captured, displayed in an iron cage, and beheaded in Moscow. It was both justice and a message. Rebellion would not be tolerated. After the rebellion, Catherine changed course. Her lofty dreams of liberating the serfs faded into silence. The uprising had revealed the limits of Enlightenment ideals in a country built on feudal hierarchy. She leaned harder on the nobility, trading their loyalty for unchecked control over their serfs. The empress who once quoted Voltaire now prioritized stability over philosophy. Reform became cautious. Surveillance tightened. Even whispers of rebellion were smothered before they could take shape. Pugachev lost his head, but his revolt left a lasting warning. Power built on inequality is stable only until it isn't. By the final years of her life, Catherine had ruled for over 3 decades, longer than any woman in Russian history. From the moment she seized power, she defied expectations, expanded her empire, and redefined what it meant to be both a monarch and a woman on the world stage. Under Catherine's rule, Russia didn't just grow, it arrived on the European stage as a true heavyweight. The empire expanded by more than 200,000 square miles, swallowing Crimea, chunks of Poland, and stretches of the Black Sea coast. These were not haphazard land grabs. They were strategic moves, securing warm water ports and reshaping trade in ways that would echo for centuries. But Catherine's legacy wasn't just etched on maps. She left her mark on culture, too. She helped found the Hermitage Museum and amassed one of the greatest art collections in Europe, corresponding directly with Enlightenment thinkers and collecting their works as passionately as she expanded her borders. Her court became a glittering hub of art, sophistication, and intellectual ambition. In a country often dismissed as provincial by Western Europeans, Catherine put Russia squarely on the cultural map. She reformed education, founding schools for girls, promoting printing, and even introducing smallpox inoculation, publicly taking the vaccine herself in a daring show of trust in science. Her reign, though, was full of contradictions. She admired Enlightenment ideals, but never abolished serfdom. In fact, she expanded it deeper into the empire. Her reforms were top-down, designed to polish Russia's exterior without completely shaking its feudal foundations. Still, Catherine brought stability, vision, and ambition. She understood that power wasn't inherited. It was built, maintained, and defended through constant vigilance. She ruled through intellect, calculation, and sheer force of will. She earned many labels: usurper, tyrant, reformer, seductress, but the one history gave her endures: great. When she died in 1796, Russia was wealthier, larger, and more formidable than it had been in centuries. She left behind a secure throne, an expanded empire, and a legend that would ripple through time. Catherine didn't just reign, she ruled strategically, unapologetically, and with a pen as sharp as any sword. For all her power, Catherine remained a woman navigating and reshaping a man's world. She wasn't born Russian. She seized the throne through a coup. She governed an empire that had never envisioned a woman at its head. And yet she thrived. She read voraciously, wrote constantly, and worked relentlessly. Her days were packed with reports, diplomacy, policy edits, and the careful management of a court always humming with intrigue. She wasn't content to wear the crown. She worked the crown like someone who knew exactly how fragile it could be, and behind the splendor, she was often lonely. She surrounded herself with courtiers, lovers, and intellectuals, but in her memoirs she admitted that trust was rare. Her relationship with her son Paul was strained. She kept him at arm's length politically, fearing he'd unravel her work. Her bond with Potemkin, so central to her reign, evolved into deep friendship, and his death in 1791 left a wound that never healed. Catherine understood image better than most rulers of her age. She consciously shaped how she would be remembered as Mother of Russia, enlightened monarch, warrior empress, patron of the arts. But beneath the portraits and proclamations was someone who endured rejection, betrayal, scandal, and rebellion, and kept moving forward. When she died in 1796, she left an empire transformed, but also questions. Could she have done more for Russia's serfs? Did politics compromise her ideals? Was she more reformer or ruler? History gave her a title she never claimed herself: the Great, not because she was flawless, kind, or just, but because she took power and wielded it on her own terms in a world that didn't want her to have any at all. She didn't just wear the crown, she redefined what it meant to deserve one. Everything about the burial radiated royalty, yet not a single inscription revealed her name. No glyphs, no titles, nothing to explain who she was. It was one of the richest female burials ever found in Mesoamerica, and yet it remained a complete mystery. Why was she buried in red powder? Who was she? A queen? A priestess? Perhaps even the consort of Pakal the Great? Researchers called her the Red Queen, and the name stuck. Even with modern forensic methods, her identity remains unknown. All we know is that she lived during the 7th century in the Golden Age of Palenque and her burial was unlike anything else found. Unlike most Maya tombs, hers had been sealed, hidden, and untouched. The isolation was deliberate. This wasn't just a ceremonial burial. It was spiritual, almost theatrical. She was not meant to be remembered through words or monuments, but through ritual, color, and the enduring mystery of her final resting place. The most striking feature wasn't the jade jewelry or the sealed chamber itself. It was the red powder. A dense layer of powdered cinnabar coated everything: the sarcophagus, the walls, her bones, and every offering around her. It clung to the stone like blood. For the Maya, this was no accident. Cinnabar, made from crushed mercury sulfide, was sacred and dangerous. Its vivid red symbolized blood, rebirth, and the life force linking the human and divine realms. Red was the color of sunrise, of sacrifice, of life emerging from death. Covering a body in it wasn't decorative. It was a ritual act meant to transform the deceased, to prepare them for their cosmic journey. Death, to the Maya, wasn't an ending. It was a crossing. The Red Queen's burial was about transition, about elevating a mortal to something divine. Only a select few in Palenque received cinnabar burials. Pakal the Great himself was one of them. That parallel led to speculation. Was she his wife, his mother, or someone of equal sacred status? Her skull rested on jaguar skin, another potent symbol of power and the underworld. Around her lay bone needles, obsidian blades, and miniature jade figures, evidence of ritual acts performed either during her life or at her death. Surrounding her crimson-washed remains was a silent constellation of offerings: jade, shell, and obsidian, each carefully placed to accompany her into the Maya afterlife, the Xibalba. Heavy jade necklaces lay across her chest, wrists, and ears, their polished green surfaces still luminous after more than a millennium underground. For the Maya, jade wasn't just decoration. It represented eternal life, the vitality of maize, the breath of the gods. Only the elite were buried with such treasures, marking her as someone of extraordinary status, perhaps even divine favor. Resting over her face was a jade funerary mask. Unlike the golden death masks of Egypt, this one was subtle and reverent, crafted from dozens of tiny mosaic tiles fitted to match the contours of her skull. It served a ritual purpose: to protect the soul, preserve her identity, and present her as divine to the gods. Nearby lay engraved bone pins, obsidian blades, and shell artifacts, perhaps the tools of a priestess, healer, or royal matriarch. One bone pin bore faint markings, like a whisper from centuries past. At her feet, ceramic vessels remained sealed, likely containing food, drink, or incense, provisions for the journey beyond death. The Maya saw the afterlife as a perilous voyage through layered realms, and these were not luxuries but essential supplies for the soul. The tomb feels intimate. It isn't overloaded with wealth for display, but composed like a sacred map. Every item chosen with intention. No gold, no spectacle, just spiritual precision. Through these objects, we catch a glimpse of how the Maya understood death not as an end, but as a transformation. The Red Queen wasn't buried to be forgotten. She was buried to become something more. She was being prepared to ascend. And yet, for all the grandeur of her burial, the Red Queen left behind a single haunting silence. No name, no inscriptions on her sarcophagus, no glyphs etched into the walls. She was clearly someone of immense power, but her identity lingers just out of reach. From the moment the tomb was opened, scholars began to piece together the puzzle. The most compelling theory is that she was Zakbu Ahau, the wife of Kinich Janub Pakal, better known today as Pakal the Great, Palenque's most celebrated ruler. Zakbu Ahau wasn't just a consort. She was nobility in her own right. Married into Palenque's royal dynasty at a young age, she bore at least 3 sons who held high status, and played key ceremonial roles during her husband's reign. If any woman merited such an elaborate burial, it was her. The tomb's location strengthened this theory. It lies only a few feet from Pakal's grand resting place in the Temple of the Inscriptions, a deliberate proximity suggesting rulers united, even in death. And then there's the cinnabar. Only 2 burials in Palenque were found with that distinctive heavy red layer, Pakal's and the Red Queen's. It's hard to believe that was a coincidence. Hopes of confirming the connection through DNA testing ended in frustration. The results were inconclusive. There was no direct maternal link, but that didn't rule out a spousal bond. Marriage, after all, doesn't require shared blood. Some scholars suggest she could have been Sakuk, Pakal's formidable mother, who ruled Palenque as queen regent before he came of age. Others argue she might have been a high priestess, a sister, or even a revered ancestor whose name had simply been worn away by time. The evidence, however, leans towards Zakbu Ahau, queen, mother of kings, and spiritual counterpart to Pakal. Her namelessness may not be an accident. In Maya cosmology, the soul lived on not through inscriptions, but through ritual and cosmic continuity. To be remembered in scarlet and silence was perhaps more powerful than being remembered in stone. She remained suspended between legend and truth, a woman of immense presence, remembered through color, placement, and ritual rather than words. To understand her, we need to understand the world she inhabited. Maya royal women wielded far more influence than many once assumed. Politics was often a family affair, and royal women were not mere decorative figures. They were diplomats, priestesses, and power brokers. They led ceremonies, sponsored temples, and legitimized dynasties through their bloodlines. Sakuk, for example, Pakal's mother, stepped onto the throne when the dynasty faced a succession crisis. She ruled as queen regent, issuing decrees and overseeing construction projects until her son came of age. She wasn't a placeholder, she was a ruler. Across the Maya world, in Yaxchilan, Naranjo, Calakmul, inscriptions show women participating in diplomacy, warfare, and ritual. They appear in stelae and murals wearing elaborate headdresses, standing beside kings as equals, sometimes even above them. Centuries later, colonial accounts would erase much of this, recasting women as silent figures in a male-dominated world. But archaeology tells another story, one of negotiation, shared power, and dynastic strategy. Against this backdrop, the Red Queen's burial takes on deeper meaning. She may not have ruled in name, but her tomb, rich, sacred, and positioned beside Pakal, marks her as a central pillar of royal power. Her jade mask wasn't mere adornment. It was a symbol of identity and authority, protecting her spirit in death as it had elevated her status in life. And then there's the architecture. Her body was discovered inside Temple 13, a modest pyramid nestled near the Temple of the Inscriptions. Its size is humble compared to its neighbor, but its placement is intentional. Maya temples were never arranged randomly. Their alignment followed celestial patterns, dynastic narratives, and sacred geography. Temple 13 concealed a sealed crypt, untouched for over 300 years. To reach it, one must descend a steep, narrow staircase, a physical and symbolic journey downward, echoing the Maya vision of the underworld. The chamber is stark and silent, its cut stone walls bare of murals or glyphs. At its center rests her sarcophagus, a limestone altar echoing the grand stone coffin of Pakal next door. The lack of inscription isn't an omission, it feels deliberate. This was not a space meant to speak to the living. It was built to guide the dead. Her tomb isn't just a grave. It's a cosmological statement, a portal built with purpose, shaped by myth, ritual, and power. And in its silence, the Red Queen's presence endures. While Pakal's tomb dazzles with its engraved lid showing cosmic trees and scenes of celestial rebirth, the Red Queen's resting place speaks in a quieter, more intimate language. There are no elaborate carvings to interpret, just the alignment of stone, the sheen of cinnabar, and the ritual weight of the chamber itself. The tomb is oriented east to west, mirroring the sun's daily journey from birth to death. The chamber is small but deliberate, a sacred enclosure designed for someone deeply revered. Maya temples were more than monuments. They were cosmological bridges linking heaven, earth, and the underworld. To be buried within one was to be lifted beyond the human realm. The Red Queen's tomb wasn't an afterthought. It was a shrine carefully designed to turn death into transformation. Her bones rest in stone, her essence in red powder, and her legacy in the architecture itself. A temple that speaks without a single glyph, quietly but powerfully declaring that she mattered. To the ancient Maya, death was not an end, but a threshold, a sacred crossing into Xibalba, the underworld. For someone of the Red Queen's stature, this crossing was not just spiritual, it was political, cosmological, and meticulously ritualized. Burials were choreographed events rooted in myth, guiding the soul through rivers of blood, shadowy trials, and encounters with death gods. Only those ritually prepared could navigate the underworld successfully. Her burial checks every mark of elite ritual, wrapped in cinnabar, entombed in stone, surrounded by offerings. Bone needles and obsidian blades hint at acts of auto-sacrifice, either rites she performed in life or symbolic rituals reenacted at her burial to strengthen her spirit. Her jade funerary mask, assembled tile by tile to fit her face, wasn't just ornamentation. In Maya belief, the face mirrored the soul. The gods needed to recognize that face during the journey beyond. The mask preserved her identity like a spiritual passport. Ceramic vessels likely held cacao, maize, pulque, or water, essentials for the afterlife journey, while other objects like stingray spines or shell trumpets may have represented tools of ritual communication, calls to the divine. For the Maya, burial wasn't goodbye, it was planting a seed. Death was part of a cycle, burial as planting, the afterlife as germination, and rebirth as a return to cosmic order. Rulers weren't merely mortals, they were earthly incarnations of divine forces, and in death, they returned to those origins. The Red Queen's burial, scarlet, stone-bound, and richly symbolic, prepared her not to vanish, but to ascend, reborn as part of the sacred structure of the cosmos. Just steps away from her resting place lies the famous tomb of Kinich Janab, Pakal the Great, inside the Temple of the Inscriptions. His burial is renowned for its scale, artistry, and spiritual complexity. What makes the Red Queen's tomb remarkable is not just its contents, but its placement. Hidden inside Temple 13, directly adjacent to Pakal's grand monument, it is positioned with deliberate precision. In Palenque, temple placement followed cosmic principles. Proximity meant meaning. Many scholars believe the Red Queen was Zakbu Ahau, Pakal's queen and trusted consort. Their burials mirror each other. Both were wrapped in cinnabar, both entombed within pyramids, both buried with jade and deep reverence. Their tombs form two halves of a larger sacred narrative. Pakal's lid depicts him descending into the underworld to rise again, a solar myth carved in stone. The Red Queen's tomb has no iconography, but its symbolism may lie in its pairing. If Pakal represents the sun's daily journey, she may represent the moon, its softer, cyclical counterpart. Together, they embody cosmic duality, masculine and feminine, sun and moon, king and queen. Maya rulership was never singular, it was relational. Cosmic harmony required balance, and that balance extended to the royal court. By placing her beside Pakal, the Maya were preserving not just a union, but a cosmic partnership. In life, they ruled together. In death, they share eternity, two souls sealed in cinnabar and stone. Their tombs speak without words. a dialogue between sun and moon, power and mystery, echoing across 13 centuries. Though her name has faded, the Red Queen of Palenque endures as one of the most enigmatic and powerful figures of the ancient Maya world. Her tomb, hidden for over 300 years, still whispers through the jungle, inviting questions that grow louder with every discovery. We may never know her exact name or title, but her presence remains, carved not in glyphs, but in architecture, ritual, and the enduring silence of history. No glyph carved her name, no stela told her story. And yet, the care taken in her burial, the richness of her offerings, the deliberate crimson shroud of cinnabar, speaks of a woman who was more than a consort. She held influence, spiritual gravity, and royal blood. The Red Queen forces us to reconsider our assumptions. She is proof that in the ancient Maya world, women were not silent. They led ceremonies, ruled cities, and secured dynasties. For centuries, kings like Pakal have dominated the spotlight, but her rediscovery reminds us that power flowed not just through kings, but through mothers, queens, priestesses, and visionaries. Her legacy isn't just in the jade beads or limestone sarcophagus. It's in the conversations she continues to spark among archaeologists, historians, artists, and storytellers. Every architectural choice, every grain of red powder, every artifact seems to say the same thing. This woman mattered. Perhaps the most extraordinary part of her story isn't what we've uncovered, but what we still don't know. She shows us that history is not a closed book, it's a living puzzle, a shared human urge to connect with those who came before us. Her body lies wrapped in red, the color of blood and rebirth, of sacrifice and life. Her face, once veiled behind jade mosaic, now meets us through science, art, and wonder. Nameless, but not voiceless. Mysterious, but not forgotten. She may have ruled a kingdom in life, but in death, she reigns over something greater, our collective imagination. Her tomb was sealed in stone, her story written in silence, and still she speaks. Picture this. You're lying flat on your back in a heavy plaster cast, staring at the ceiling, with your body doing its best impression of a crumbling building. Most of us would scroll endlessly on our phones, but Frida Kahlo didn't have that luxury. Instead, her mother cleverly rigged up a special easel above her bed, complete with a mirror on the canopy so she could see herself. And there, surrounded by stillness and pain, Frida began to paint. At first, it was just to pass the time, but slowly, it became something far more intense, a conversation with herself that would end up changing art forever. Her first subject was the only thing she had full access to, her own reflection, not out of vanity, but out of necessity. What emerged wasn't decorative or polite. It was raw survival. The accident had shattered her physically, but it also cracked open a door into her inner world, a place she explored with brushes instead of scalpels. The girl who had once dreamed of healing others now began to heal herself, one brushstroke at a time. Her early works were small, painted on tin or wood panels, inspired by retablos, Mexican devotional paintings that tell stories of suffering and miracles. Except, instead of saints and angels, Frida turned that lens inward. Her body became the altar. Her pain became the story. She painted herself split, pierced, and bleeding, but never passive. She looked out at the viewer, unflinching. One portrait shows her impaled by nails like a modern-day martyr. Another has her tethered to a broken column, her spine crumbling like ancient ruins. She didn't paint pretty flowers to soothe the eye. She painted pain to make you look. Her work was personal, defiant, and laced with irony. It was like she took all the things society politely ignores and hung them on the wall for everyone to see, framed in color, culture, and symbolism. By the time she could walk again, painfully, with a cane. She was no longer the girl who wanted to become a doctor. She was an artist, and her art was unlike anything anyone had seen before. In 1928, still recovering, and just 21 years old, Frida met Diego Rivera. Imagine walking up to one of the most famous painters in your country, interrupting his work on a giant mural, and asking bluntly, "Do I have talent?" Diego looked at her paintings and didn't hesitate. "Yes," he said, and not just to be nice. He saw something unfiltered, full of rage, humor, beauty, and pain. Their relationship became, well, legendary. She once said, "I suffered 2 accidents in my life, one in which a streetcar knocked me down. The other was Diego." He was 20 years older, enormous in both reputation and presence. She was fierce, sharp-tongued, and already walking with a cane. Her parents described their marriage as an elephant marrying a dove. Not exactly the makings of a quiet domestic life. Diego supported her art, but was famously unfaithful, including with Frida's sister, Cristina. Frida was devastated, but she didn't wilt. She took lovers of her own, men and women alike, including rumored affairs with Leon Trotsky and Georgia O'Keeffe. They divorced in 1939, then remarried a year later under new terms. She kept her independence, her money, and her home. Their love was turbulent, unconventional, but profoundly creative. He hurt her, inspired her, believed in her, and in many ways pushed her to become the artist she was. In the 1930s, Frida followed Diego to the United States, where he painted murals in San Francisco, Detroit, and New York. Picture Frida, passionately Mexican, politically radical, landing in the middle of shiny industrial America at the height of the Great Depression. It was a lot. She admired none of the luxury and all of the contradictions. In letters home, she mocked the materialism and obsession with appearances she saw, saying, in effect, "You can keep your skyscrapers. I miss the chaos and color of home." While Diego covered factory walls with sweeping murals, Frida turned inward. Her canvases were small, but emotionally vast. Her style sharpened, surreal, symbolic, intensely personal. She painted herself not out of ego, but out of necessity. With her body in constant pain from surgeries and a failed pregnancy in Detroit, her inner world became both refuge and battlefield. She wasn't just painting portraits. She was building a visual language to make sense of her life. And in that quiet space between pain and paint, Frida Kahlo became something entirely new. Frida's portraits were never shy. They showed her bleeding, fragmented, exposed. And yet, her face remained calm and direct, as if daring you to look away first. One of her most striking works, Henry Ford Hospital, captures her lying on a bed, surrounded by floating symbols of loss: a fetus, a snail, surgical tools, a cracked pelvis. It's raw, emotional, and entirely unfiltered. A canvas that doesn't just tell the truth, it bleeds it. Back in Mexico, Frida threw herself into politics with the same intensity she brought to her art. She and Diego welcomed Leon Trotsky into their home during his exile, turning their blue house into a refuge for revolutionaries. She wore Tijuana dresses, bright, traditional, and unapologetically indigenous, not just because they were beautiful, though they were, but because they were a statement. Imagine showing up to a modern art, opening in full traditional dress while everyone else is in monochrome turtlenecks. Frida wasn't trying to blend in. She was the statement. While Diego painted grand murals of revolutions, Frida painted the personal cost of them. The body torn apart, the mind on fire, the self always staring back from the canvas. In illness and in exile, she became more than a painter of pain. She became a painter of resistance. When Frida returned to Mexico in the late 1930s, she wasn't just Diego Rivera's wife anymore. She was her own force, an artist whose work pulsed with honesty, surreal symbolism, and cultural pride. Casa Azul, her home in Coyoacan, became an extension of her mind. Bright cobalt walls with yellow trim, Aztec statues nestled among trees, monkeys and parrots roaming freely like curious housemates. It was equal parts sanctuary, studio, and political salon. She surrounded herself with pre-Columbian artifacts, folk art, revolutionary literature, and, of course, vibrant colors. She wore flowers in her hair and bold dresses, painting in a room scented with copal incense, while mariachi music drifted in from the street. This was the period when her creativity truly exploded. Paintings like the two Fridas revealed a divided self, European dress on one side, indigenous attire on the other. It was a portrait of love, loss, and identity, stitched together with a single, exposed artery. In 1939, her work was exhibited in Paris, where artists like Picasso, Breton, and Kandinsky praised her fiercely original style. But Frida, in typical fashion, wasn't about to be boxed in. When André Breton tried to claim her as a surrealist, she corrected him. "They thought I was a surrealist," she said. "But I wasn't. I never painted dreams. I painted my own reality." While others painted ethereal visions, Frida painted Mexico, its roots, its contradictions, its beauty, and its pain. But even as her artistic voice reached new heights, her body continued to betray her. Decades of surgeries, infections, and constant pain shaped her daily life. She painted propped up in bed, corseted, in traction, brushes clutched like weapons. Her work became darker, sharper. In the broken column, she depicts herself split down the middle, nails piercing her flesh, a crumbling column standing where her spine should be. Her face remained steady, unflinching. Pain was no longer just a theme. It was her constant companion, her antagonist, and her muse. Her politics grew louder, too. She joined the Mexican Communist Party, wrote fiery letters, marched in demonstrations, and called out imperialism wherever she saw it. When she could no longer walk, she showed up to protests in a wheelchair, holding signs and shouting slogans. She was, quite literally, a revolutionary on wheels. In 1953, Mexico finally gave her a solo exhibition, a moment that was long overdue. Her doctors told her she couldn't attend. So naturally, Frida showed up anyway, by ambulance. She was carried into the gallery on a stretcher, dressed in full traditional attire, placed in the center of the room like a queen on her throne, surrounded by her art. Guests drank tequila as she laughed and greeted them, eyes still burning with that unmistakable fire. Her later works became both playful and fierce. In Marxism Will Give Health to the Sick, she painted herself in a steel corset, cradled by Marx's hands, tossing away symbols of oppression. Her last known painting was a still life of sliced watermelons, bright and bursting with life. On one slice, she wrote, "Viva la vida," long live life. Even staring down death, Frida was defiant, joyful, and political. She died on July 13, 1954, at 47, in the same house where she'd been born. The official cause was a pulmonary embolism, but those close to her whispered of exhaustion. Years of surgeries, pain, and relentless fight finally catching up. Just days earlier, she had attended a protest against the CIA coup in Guatemala, weak and in her wheelchair, fist raised high. Her final diary entry read, "I hope the exit is joyful, and I hope never to return." Her funeral was held at the Palacio de Bellas Artes, Mexico's most prestigious cultural space. Draped in the red flag of the Communist Party, she lay surrounded by friends, family, artists, and revolutionaries. Frida had lived and painted with unflinching honesty. And in death, she remained exactly what she had always been, a force. Diego Rivera was devastated. He called Frida the greatest love of his life, even though his betrayals had nearly shattered her. But after her death, something remarkable unfolded. Frida Kahlo simply refused to fade away. At first, her name lingered quietly in art circles. Her work didn't fit neatly anywhere. Too political for the surrealists, too surreal for the traditionalists. But over time, her image, her story, and her fearless individuality began to echo louder and farther. By the 1970s and 1980s, feminist scholars and activists were reclaiming forgotten female voices, and Frida's was one of the loudest to rise. She wasn't just a painter anymore. She became a symbol, a living intersection of pain and beauty. Feminism forged through resistance, Mexican identity celebrated without apology, queerness lived openly, disability transformed into power, and authenticity that never asked for permission. Her face, unibrow, flowers, gaze steady as ever, became iconic. Her blue house turned into a museum. Her diary, once private, became a treasured window into her mind. Her paintings now hang in the most prestigious museums in the world, confronting viewers with a truth that refuses to be prettified. In life, she had often been seen through Diego's shadow. In death, she stepped boldly into her own light. She didn't just leave us paintings, she left us a mirror and dared us to look, not with pity or fear, but with the same fire that fueled her. Today, Frida Kahlo's face is everywhere. It's on t-shirts, murals, dolls, posters, and memes. But her legacy isn't about mass production, it's about recognition. People see her face and know the story behind it. Frida never tried to be perfect. She didn't fit into neat categories, and she didn't care to. In a world that constantly demands polished perfection, she gave us something far better, the truth. Raw, vibrant, angry, joyful, contradictory truth. She took everything that made her different, her disability, her queerness, her politics, her culture, and turned it into art that crossed borders and generations. She became more than an artist. She became a global symbol of defiance, feminism, cultural pride, and creative resistance. For queer communities, she stands as a fearless bisexual icon who lived without apology in a time that expected silence. For women, she's proof that power doesn't need permission. For disabled artists, she's a beacon showing that pain can shape creation, not end it. For Mexico, she's a reclaimed daughter, fierce, folkloric, and woven into the national soul. Her paintings, once dismissed as too strange or too personal, are now revered worldwide. Works like the Two Fridas, self-portrait with thorn necklace and hummingbird, and the broken column don't just hang on walls. They reach into the viewer. They resonate with anyone who's ever suffered and turned that suffering into something sacred. Frida lived in the margins and dragged them into the spotlight. She embraced contradictions. A communist who wore gold, a betrayed woman who loved again, a body in pieces with a soul that refused to break. And through it all, she painted, not just with color, but with conviction. Frida Kahlo never set out to become a symbol. She simply told the truth about herself. And in doing so, she told the truth for countless others who had never seen their stories reflected in art. Today, when we see her face, we don't just see a painter. We see courage, we see color, we see resistance, we see Frida, not gone, but immortal.